Hello there, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. James here as ever for today's video on the Advanced Audit and Assurance paper. You're in the right place if you can fit either one of these two questions. Well, are you actually sitting the upcoming ACCA Advanced Audit and Assurance exam paper itself? Or are you potentially actually considering doing this as one of your options? Well, if you can answer yes to either of those two questions, you're in the right place, and this video is definitely going to help you. The reason why this is actually going to help you is because I'm an ACCA qualified member from the UK, and first of all, the main thing is I have passed the Advanced Audit and Assurance paper. The second thing is I've also failed the Advanced Audit and Assurance paper. And thirdly, now I pass on my tips to people who watch on my YouTube channel so that it helps you out from my experience. So on my actual Instagram account, where I interact with students from across the world, I put online this message up here the other day, asking for who would like a video on Advanced Audit and Assurance and what are your thoughts on it. So on the usual high performance and high budget, this video is dedicated out to Olivia, Mohammed, Renjith, Mashood, Adnu, Anju on there as well. The list goes on and on. I've been inundated with messages from you guys listening out there, and this is one of the hot videos that you really want. I've also done an actual review of the external examiner's report, which in my eyes is fundamental if you're going to be thinking about doing this exam or actually having to do it as well. So I've put that in the description to this video below. Highly recommend for you to check it out as well. That is fundamental. Well, today's video, I'm going to go through, in my eyes, the 4 key top tip areas along with my other comments and points that are really going to help you out. And if you take notice of this, it could be the difference between you passing it, getting a 50 plus, and also not having to retake it. The reason why I stipulate this so much is the pass rate is so low. Give or take, it's about 30%. So for every 10 students that sit it, only 3 will pass. So I really hope these 4 key areas will help you, because they are from my experience and from the external examiner's report as well, which again I put in the description below. It's all designed to help you out with your upcoming examination. So without any further ado, I think we should get absolutely straight into this, because tip number 1 is absolutely fundamental and one of the main reasons why I failed this paper, and that is tip number 1, past papers and exam technique. Heed my warning on this. You cannot do enough of the past papers that can be found for free on ACCA's website as well. I've done videos on this on my YouTube channel as well, so make sure you check these out. The other thing that is absolutely fundamental to you who will be sitting this exam is time management. This is just a must in terms of things. It works out on the basis of 1.8 minutes per mark. The reason for this is you have 3 hours, so 180 minutes for the 100 marks. And yes, I know you get that 50 minutes at the start as well, but I like to keep that in reserve just in case any hiccups come into it. You've got to do past paper practice questions 2 times. Actually, in that scenario. So for question A, which we'll come on to later on, that is 1.5 hours. You've got to get used to concentrating for that amount of time, question analysis, and also practice on it as well. These are absolutely fundamental things that so many students in this examination take too long on so many different questions. But when you're actually going through the questions now, next tip, again, if you've got pen and paper with you today, this is going to be fundamental and is the difference between passing and failing, is someone who is going to fail the exam will be very generic. They will just say things that are out of the textbook, and it's sort of a textbook answer, exactly so. But if you're going to pass this examination, you have to be specific. So relating that to the actual scenario that you have in the question, you've got to be clear and concise. You've got to be so to the point, detailed, and that is the approach that is needed. Not a generic sort of writing out the sort of textbook answer, because that is not what the external is looking for. When we come on to the external examiner's report, and you have my analysis of this on there for free, it's on the actual channel, so feel free to subscribe so you get access to all of my materials on there. It will benefit you from my experience. Use it and it will be an absolute savior for you. So the next thing here is applying it to the scenario. That is our specific nature. Okay, specific is the key word to get down. And once you get into this mindset, when you're going through the paper, the more specific you are, the more marks you're going to hit. Trust me, that is the technique that you need to be applying on this as well. Answering the requirement as well is another fundamental thing, where when you actually review maybe your actual past paper practice questions, you will see, why was I drifting off? I wasn't actually being specific to the requirement, and pick up on the buzzwords in there as well that you've got to be referring to. So whether that's audit procedures, communication, ethics, anything on these lines, be specific to the actual words the examiner has given you. Now, question number 1. This is another fundamental thing for exam technique, which is a case of, are you going to pass or are you going to fail? Question 1, you've got to get practicing at identifying which scenario you are actually referring to. So to elaborate on that a bit more, there are 3 real tip areas as to what could possibly come up in question 1 that is worth 50 marks. So in other words, if you don't get this one right, or you don't identify which one of the 3 it is, you can say goodbye and you're probably going to see you again. So the 3 main ones for question 1 are either business risk, and again, very key to write this down, audit risk, or risk of material misstatement. They are absolutely fundamental, and you'll see different types going on year, but the tip here is you've got to pick up on what the question is asking for you to analyse. Absolutely fundamental, and is one of the common mistakes which people will fail on this exam. Applying the actual standards as well. So you need to apply the international standards on auditing. Now, I realise that different exam papers around the world, whether it be Singapore or UK, they'll have different standards, but this is one of the specifics that you need to get good at. And actually, some of the standards relate to some specifics in terms of it. So ISA 240 actually relates to the auditor's responsibility to fraud. So if you see in a questions something on the lines of money laundering or anything on those lines that fraud could be an implication, put in your answer that you're aware of the ISA 240 and explain the specifics, how it relates to it as well. That is going to be a massive tick in the external examiner when they come to review your paper. That is going to be a separator between an actual generic paper, just something really easy to write down, versus your specific paper referring to those actual standards. All of this in exam technique and past papers, but I've got one more for you as well on here. Clear calculations as well and workings. This is fundamental, especially in question 1 where you might have some ratios to calculate and materiality. You've got to get into the practice of when that gun goes at the start, the race is on, because you have to get stuck in straight away. A good exam technique on here, which I used to do as a student, was first page I used to write down all of my workings. So the external used to see exactly where I was referencing it from, all of my figures, all of my workings as well. With the next key step for exam technique is explaining and identifying and then explaining the impact on the financial statements. So in other words, and again, key thing, make sure you write this down, you've got to state to the marker, is it going to have a positive effect or a negative effect on the financial statements? Other keywords to get down now are, is it actually going to overstate the financial statements, or is it going to be an understatement as well? These are the key things that you will see in the actual answers on the past papers that you need to get into your technique to be referring to. So that is me just covering on there, not to have down just textbook answers, applying it to the scenario, workings, technique to get it down as effectively and efficiently as possible, but it's all going to come down to practice from you. That is the main thing. You've got to put in the time, but work out when you actually do those past papers best and actually reviewing the exam technique. For me, with the advanced audit and assurance paper, I used to practice questions first thing in the morning, give myself a break, change it up for maybe some ethics around lunchtime, afternoon, and then later on into the evening that day when it's still fresh in my mind, review the paper when my energy levels have dipped off, and then I'm going to have a more effective day. But you've got to work out when you best do it and hold yourself accountable. I've actually done a study with me video on here as well, where you actually have the countdown so that you can actually work with me as well. So if you actually go onto the channel, access it, it's all free for you to use, but it's a really good tool to hold yourself accountable. So give it a try, don't knock it, it's a really good tool to have as well. Plus, you can see the timer going down and how very little time you've got. So that is tip number 1. I know you've got loads of points in there, but they are fundamental. Exam technique and past papers, an absolute must. The more you do, the better. Whew. Well, that's just tip 1. 3 more to go. Don't you worry about that. Well, number 2. Tip 2, and this is fundamental because it is fundamental topics. Now, I can hear you saying, oh, James, but that's just referring to the actual core text. I've got that. Yes, okay, I agree with you. These actual fundamental core topics are in the core text, but there are some that appear year on year, and you are given clues by the external examiner and in the past papers as well. So, pens and paper at the ready again, because question number 1, as we stated before in the technique, you've got 3 potential key areas on there. The first one is business risk. The second one is audit risk, and the third one is risk of material misstatement. The key thing I've got to tell you, because this is one of the reasons why people fail, is if you have an audit risk question and you answer it as if it's a business risk question, you are not likely to get many marks at all. And when that is a 50-mark question, you're going to be really struggling to get enough to pass. So get into the habit of, a good revision technique was, I used to go through the past papers, question 1, and it used to be a sort of little game where you just read it through, and then I went to myself, which one is it? Which one is it? Which one is it? And the more you read through, you get to understand the actual keywords. And trust me, if you don't make that mistake as you go through, there are little jinks that put students off. But the more practice you have, go through the lot of the past papers. That'll be a massive recommendation on this. So that's the first key topic area and technique. The next one is audit procedures. So again, pen and paper, jot it down as well. But it's a case of, yes, stating the audit procedure, such as maybe reviewing the board minutes, classic one that students put down in advanced audit assurance, but you've got to say why you're doing this. What are you actually looking for in those board minutes? That is the fundamental thing that, again, is going to take a generic answer up to that specific level. That is paramount, that you need to get down there. The next thing is obviously the audit reports, and this is where the difference comes into it, where I'll have people watching this who work in audit, and James, I've seen an audit report, I've computed an audit report, I know an audit report top to bottom. Brilliant, okay. However, there are lots of students doing this, like myself in that position, who I never worked in audit that much. I had very little experience, but I know some students got 0 experience in terms of it. You have got to get familiar with how it's actually laid out, content and structure as well. What is the actual positioning of the areas in there? The reason why I say this is because in some of the past paper questions, some aspects in that report are actually missing altogether. Or the other key thing is some of them are in the wrong place. So you might actually have an audit opinion potentially in the introduction or the brief, something on those lines. I don't know. You have to identify it based on the scenario that you're provided with. But understanding that audit report, how it flows, and who is in charge and who is accountable for each area is absolutely key. So that's the actual audit report in itself. Then we move on to the actual audit opinions. Next key thing to get jotted down, because we have the 4. Qualified opinion on there, unqualified opinion, adverse opinion, and an accept for opinion as well. The key thing on here is 1, actually identifying which the actual scenario relates to, okay? But for these, you've also got to say, and again, next key points are when and why they are issued. When and why they are issued. That relates again to the scenario, specific dates, and what is going on in that situation. Where are they also presented is another key matter, and what do they actually say? Are they actually describing and being in enough detail and analysis, or could you have actually stated a few more points to be a bit more robust? Again, taking it from that actual sort of just being generic. That is what the external examiner is looking for you to identify, that there are gaps in the accuracy here, that you're now going to take it up to that specific. So again, referring to those audit standards as well, that is going to be the difference that takes it up. So these are some of the fundamental topics, along with ethics as well, which, not to give the game away, but there's a technique for that which we'll come on to later on. If you haven't, as I said already, have a look at my external examiner's report in terms of what things have come up in the past, and there are some areas which they actually tell you, such as these we've gone through now, that are a must that have to come up. You have to understand these fundamental concepts to pass the Advanced Audit and Assurance exam. So, you have been what? And a nice end to tip number 2 there as well. So that is fundamental for me. So we've gone through the exam technique and past papers, absolute must. Fundamental topics and how to approach them, absolute must. Okay. Third, deep breath now, coming on to it. Third point on here is your ethics technique. Okay, this is something which comes up the majority, if not on every paper, and it's up to you to identify that technique and apply it. So what I thought I'd do is, because it's so fundamental, it'll be worth easy between 5 to 10 marks, depending on the detail I want you to go in or the number of scenarios, but I'm just going to run it through with you step by step. And the good thing for your pen and paper is there are only 3 steps in this, but the warning is there. You need to know them all the way through. So first of all, key thing here is identify that threat. This is where your question and analysis comes into it. So an example of this could be an actual intimidation threat. So potentially you're an auditor, you're putting together an audit, or maybe you're an audit junior, and someone in a more senior position comes along and says, James, we need to do this. However, you know that we should be doing this as a result. There is an intimidation threat from someone senior onto you. Okay, we've identified that. This is where we can then start to link it into actually some of the other areas of the actual opinion as well. And the actual ethics side. So make sure, because they do link into it as well, and by opinion I mean how you actually interpret the scenario here. So if you can refer it back to the ethics standards as well, so integrity, we've got to get in there. Objectivity, that is going to be another fundamental one. Confidentiality is going to be fundamental again. Professional behaviour and professional competence and due care. Referring to those 5 in these ethics techniques is going to actually make it more robust as well. Just make sure it relates to the scenario and you're being specific. So coming back to the steps, now that you've got those key points in, we're talking about an intimidation threat, so that you're an audit junior, for example. So the first thing there was identifying that threat. We've done it. Big tick in that actual mark scheme. Second one now is, why is this a threat? Okay, so why is it a threat? The thing that you have to get down now. This is the difference between a fail and a pass. Be specific in this scenario. So maybe in the actual scenario it says you will lose your job if you don't do this. Okay? Things happen in terms of these matters, but you've got to identify in the scenario why this is the case for that intimidation threat. Being specific is going to be a massive tick, and again referring it back to the 5 ethical standards in there as well, the key terms. So that is, what is the threat? Okay, why is this a threat is the next key one. Okay, so we've been specific, related into potential job loss as well. And then the third one, state and apply a safeguard or an action. So if you've got an intimidation threat because you're being asked to actually correct the financial statements and you know it's not right by a senior member of staff, what you would need to do there, I would say, being specific, is there another senior member of staff who you could speak to about the actual issue? Okay, so that is an actual sort of action that you could take in that position. That is what the external examiner is looking for. Or potentially, I'm thinking on the top of my feet now, and they're going, if I work for an employer, there's going to be a union or something on those lines where, say for example, if it's the most senior person in the business, well, who else can I go to? Because seniority is taken out on that in the hierarchy, isn't it? So it's a case of, well, Okay, can I go to a union representative or someone from HR as another aspect? But again, be specific because of the senior level of that staff member, and actually, well, this is a case of the best resolve from the information provided as well. So those are the 3 key steps to answering any ethics question. And trust me, if you start following that and apply it with good practice and keep on trying it with repetition, referring to those ethical standards as well, that is the full-on technique, and it keeps on coming up as well. So I hope you've got that down. If you need to rewind the video, please do, because it's so important as well. Don't worry, point 4, which we're coming on to now, is going nowhere. So don't you worry about that. If you have found the points helpful, as we've been going through so far, and I know they have, so they're going to help you, give it a thumbs up as well for the video, because that means that more students who are sitting audit and assurance will see this as well. Coming on to actually now point 4, and I like to mix it up on here, so this one will really hit home as well, because no student will like this. But for point 4, I am saying don't miss out. And you're writing that down going, James, don't miss out. Okay, I'm going to walk you through it. No student likes to miss out, whether that's a freebie or anything on those lines. First of all, as I stated, the external examiner's report. If you haven't looked through it, please do. I've done the analysis, as I said, it's in the description below. Play it through, do some cleaning, pop it on. There are some mega tips on there for key areas that keep coming up year on year that you have to be aware of. The next thing, very important now, make sure you get this jotted down, are the presentation marks. There are 4 on this exam. You do not want to be throwing away 4 marks that actually you can get quite easily. The key thing here to note down is they are all specific to question number 1. Again, I've put it in the actual external examiner's report where those 4 presentation marks relate to, so make the most of it, and if you're picking up on those altogether, well, that's another 46 that you need to find in the exam. Rather 46 than 50 or more, so there we go. That's the first thing on there. So what have we got to go through now? Well, on the external examiner's report, they stated on there, okay, quality control, ethical and professional issues are an absolute must on this exam. So those are the key things that you've got to get jotted down because they're going to keep coming up and up again. So what I recommend here is actually noting in the past papers that you're analysing, maybe just put QC on the side. That used to be something I used to do, or a big E, or a PI for professional issues, something on those lines, so that you start to identify, and when you analyse the past papers again, you go through and say, it was in question 3 this time, question 2 that time, it came up in question 1 this time. You'll start to see the patterns, and it's going to benefit you out. But again, it's coming down to past paper analysis and going through it. Now, next key thing to get jotted down, because this is a must, and it's just, why wouldn't you? Technical articles. Okay. Now, I'm sure you're going to loathe me saying this, because long day of revision, why would I want to read a technical article? They are available for free on the ACCA's website. The details I'll put in the description below. And what the external examiner does is they release technical articles and they fit in questions based on these technical articles. So if I'm, say, sitting a exam paper in December and I see that they've released a technical article in September time, there is a high chance that they are actually potentially going to put that in the examination, because after it's been formatted and rewritten and rechecked, the technical articles are there because they are actually used by chartered accountants, qualified accountants, CPD, so it's to keep you up to date, and that is the point of the advanced audit and assurance examination, so it's fit for purpose. So make sure you read the actual articles, the up-to-date ones as well. Probably going back a year, I'd say. You can't read them all, but it's a case of I would definitely make the most of it. The external examiner wrote in their actual report that students, they could tell when they were marking, basically. A really good answer, you could tell they'd read the article, versus a poor generic answer that just sort of was really just hoping and wishing on their answers they were getting down. So that is the difference between a mark that could be getting you over that 50 plus line to falling short, which unfortunately so many students do. So the technical articles are a massive thing on this. And then finally, don't miss out, okay? Don't miss out answering all of the requirements. This comes up in the external examiner's report, and I believe it was one of the reasons why I failed the first time. You've got to analyse the question fully. In the actual advanced audit and assurance paper, the question is a couple of sentences usually in the requirement. You've got to identify the chunks or the different areas, underline, highlight the key terms. I used to write a little one or two on there as well, so that it was a reminder to me that, say, I've got to talk about confidentiality and I've got to talk about integrity. In other words, if you don't talk about integrity, you can say goodbye to half of the marks. And once you get into that habit, doing it to time, going through it, analysing where you missed out on the marks, being specific, referring to standards, actually applying it to the given scenario, not a textbook answer, that, in my eyes, is just going to take you like that is the main thing. So that is my last guiding words of wisdom for the video as well. If you follow these 4 key area tips, then I have no doubt that you are going to be pushing for that pass mark on here. Just put yourself out there. If you need any study tips as to how to balance your time or any other recommendations, I've got study tip videos on the actual YouTube channel as well, so feel free to subscribe. The button will be at the bottom. You'll have access to all of my latest videos, and they're all available for you there for free as well. If you've got any other questions, because as you know, I'm very active on my Instagram account, I've put all the details below. Feel free to put in the comments any other questions you've got, and feedback on the video as well if you found it really helpful, because I know it's going to definitely help you out as we go through. As ever, if you have liked the tips as well, feel free to give it a massive thumbs up. I appreciate it as well. And if you want me to do any other videos, maybe advanced audit and assurance wasn't your examination, but you wanted to listen through because you're interested, because you might be doing it. If you've got any other videos you would like me to cover, feel free to put it down there. I reply to absolutely every single one. It's an 100% student-led channel, so I'm more than happy to help you out as well. So, I'm pleased with that. Very pleased with that. That is going to definitely help you out going into your ACCA exam. All I can do now is wish you all the best of luck. Keep following the channel, keep spreading the word on it as well, and I really appreciate your support. But as always, on that bombshell, I'll see you next time. Cheers.